I woke up one Monday morning feeling really just completely over myself. I wasn't depressed or anxious. I wasn't grieving. I just felt really stuck. I felt tired and restless, a bit unanchored, but at the same time I knew this just didn't have to be my life. There was a deep voice inside of me urging me to do something and to listen. So I went through my normal Monday morning routine, got the kids ready for school, got myself ready for work. I dropped them off, but I found myself driving home. I called work and I called in sick. I thought I just need a mental health day. So I went and sat out on the lawn with my dog, with my phone, with my laptop, and decided that I was going to meditate. So it's something I do regularly. I don't know why I took my laptop with me that day. Well, it wasn't usual, but I just found myself sitting out there with my laptop. I was really feeling quite unanchored that day. Feelings that were actually quite familiar to me, yet feelings that most people around me didn't know that I experienced on a very regular basis back then. Again, it wasn't depression or anxiety, I just didn't feel right. I was a bit frustrated, I was a bit impatient maybe, and just unanchored. That's the only way I can describe it. So I sat in my regular meditation for about 20 minutes and then came out and just sat in the sun with my dog. I grabbed my laptop and I Googled yoga teacher training. Now that wasn't completely impulsive. I've been thinking about doing yoga teacher training for quite some time, but obviously not enough to make me go any further. But this particular day, I just felt charmed to look it up. I looked up a specific one that my sister-in-law had gone to. She raved about it, but it just didn't inspire me. So I procrastinated, opened my emails, found an email from the Australian Physiotherapy Association, and I was just looking down at professional development. And I found a course that was for physios, just putting yoga into our clinical practice. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I scrolled a little bit further and found that they had a 200-hour teacher training, nothing to do with physio, just a pure teacher training program. But it was in Melbourne in 6 weeks. So I briefly entertained the idea of just checking out of life for 3 weeks. Ditching the kids, ditching work, ditching all of my responsibilities, even skipping Easter that year. Doesn't that sound awesome as well? But I sat there on the ground thinking, can I really do that? Can I really just check out of life? So I Googled where the course was in Melbourne and texted one of my friends who lives down there. Hey, Trace, where's Prime? And she texted back, love, that's only a few minutes from me. Are you coming down? Come stay with me. So I'm like, okay, it's interesting. But I still have my kids, what can I do with them? So I text my mum, as we all do. So, Mum, what are you doing at Easter? Do you think you could have the kids for 3 weeks? And she just texts straight back, yeah, I can have them. Which actually makes me think she probably thought I needed to go away as well. So then I text my nanny, what are you doing at Easter? Are you around? Can you help my mum? Sure, Mum with boobs. Yeah, that's what I got called. Mum with boobs. I can have the babies. And then I just text work, I'm going to be away for 3 weeks over Easter. Sure, Paula, we'll block you out. I thought, okay, this is really weird. So you get the point, every door was just opening effortlessly. It was just me holding myself back. So I called the teacher training school and I spoke to a lovely woman who'd actually done the course herself. And next thing I knew, I'm handing over my credit card details and I was locked in. So 6 weeks later, I was in Melbourne. I walked into the yoga studio and was greeted by my teacher with just the most warm, loving embrace like she knew me. And I had no idea what was ahead of me. True to my personality, I had done no research. I just turned up. It was suggested that we switch on from life as much as possible, turn our phones off, and just surrender to the experience. So I did. I embraced my mantra, discipline over motivation, something I always preach as a health coach. And I did everything that was asked of me. So what unfolded over the next 3 weeks is very hard to describe. Yes, I became a yoga teacher, but I gained a newfound understanding of just how much stress and emotion that my body had been holding from my past experiences. And I finally found a place to start to heal the parts of me that felt really unanchored that Monday sitting on the lawn. The first problem I encountered when I got back from that love bubble of yoga was that it was quite difficult to reintegrate back into normal life. I'd get in my car and think, why the fuck is everyone so stressed out? I fell into a mini spiritual depression, which actually my teachers warned that might happen. But a voice inside of me kept urging me to keep moving down this path. And next thing you know, I'd signed up for a pilgrimage to India with my yoga teachers. Once again, following charm and my inner voice without any question, I had no clue what was ahead of me. See, one of my weaknesses is that I'm not a planner, which in this scenario was quite terrifying, flying into a third world country by myself, knowing I had to find my own way. My planning was sketchy at best, but my confidence was sky high. I'd just wing it. I'd be fine. What could go wrong? So I arrived at Derrida Airport, and of course the guy I'd organised to pick me up wasn't there. That's cool. I was called the hotel. And after a bit of back and forth, and a little bit of language barrier, I heard, "Yes, Mrs. Paula, your driver is on the way." So after 10 minutes of people watching, a young Indian dude ran towards me with a bit of foolscap that said Paula Hindle with my date of birth. So I thought, okay, I'll follow him. And we ended up in this beat up 80s Datsun, heading off, hopefully, to Rishikesh. I had no idea where Rishikesh was. I didn't know how long it would take to drive there. But something in me was trusting my new young Indian friend. Except for a brief moment when he pulled off on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. And I sat in the back thinking, what is he doing? Next minute, another guy pulls up on the other side of the road, and he seemed to be chatting to his Indian friend. And I thought, oh shit, this is it. The gig is up, it's time. But then I reasoned, I kind of reckon this giant Amazonian chick could outrun those two skinny guys. So I grabbed my bag and my passport and my cash, and I just waited. But turns out he was just taking a pee on the side of the road. And I was okay, cool. This is what happens. And I was fine next time that happened again on my trip. So it's hard to explain or know where to start when I talk about my experience in India, the pray part of my eat, my drink, pray, love story. So we better go back to the beginning, the drink part. We certainly do have a drinking culture in Australia, and more specifically in our mums community. You can't open social media without a meme talking about how we need to drink to get through mum life. And that certainly became true for me, particularly in my years of early parenting as a mum. I recall my 32nd birthday. The day started with me being woken up by my 2-year-old son. I was 36 weeks pregnant with my baby girl. And I was getting ready to go down to Byron Bay. Sounds like a dream way to spend your birthday, right? And my family and friends all believed that's what I was doing, because I told them I was heading down to Byron to have a bit of a rest before the birth of my baby girl. Why wouldn't you believe me? The truth was, I was driving down to Byron with my 2-year-old son to visit my husband, who'd been in a live-in mental health facility for the past 6 weeks with acute suicidal ideation. I was hoping to bring him back so he could be with me for the birth of my baby girl. My birthday was very low on the priority list that year. In fact, most of my needs, my dreams, my desires were all very low on the priority list that year. And for years before, and for many years after. Living with a spouse with mental illness really takes a toll. So after 2 nights living in with him and with our son, and after some family counselling sessions so I could learn how I could better take care of him, I got the green light to take him home. To take care of him, to take care of my son, to take care of my unborn baby girl, to take care of my business, and to take care of myself. But being the perpetual positive woman that I am, I believed we were back on track. My beautiful baby girl came into the world a few weeks later, and I was very relieved to have her in my arms. But I was also extremely stressed and worried about my husband, who I had to actually send home that night because I knew he wasn't coping. And it was that moment in hospital with my baby girl that I knew that my life was about to get a lot worse before it got any better. So without going into the details of the next 2 years, after watching my husband deteriorate down a horrendous path of self-destruction, including job losses, alcohol abuse, self-harm, hospitalizations, and suicide attempts, I eventually came home one day to find that he'd taken his life in our family home. So I was now a widow and a solo mum of 2 kids who were only 2 and 4. So a concoction of stress and grief and trauma had left me in a severe state of adrenal fatigue. I was very depleted, but still there was a very loud, dominating voice inside of me telling me that I would be okay. Looking back, I've always had that voice inside of me. I heard her really loudly the day after my husband suicided, telling me that I would be fine. It just took a really long time for me to trust her and to listen and follow that inner guidance. So these are the experiences that led me to that day, that Monday, sitting on the lawn with my dog, Googling yoga teacher training. My inner voice was telling me that it was a spiritual connection that I was missing from my life. That final piece of the puzzle when it comes to holistic health and wellness, something that I always valued very highly and even based my career around. Which is why to outsiders, I looked totally fine, very fit. But on the inside, my inner world was in turmoil. I needed support to manage my feelings and emotions, support in stripping back all of the shit that had been hurled to me for years, the shit that led to all of the limiting beliefs that I was holding as truth, the shit that had me feeling restless and unanchored that Monday, and going through that cycle of burnout. I needed support to love and to trust again, and to listen to that inner voice that kept trying to come through. So a few days into my India pilgrimage, I found myself sitting in a cave in the Himalayas, beside the Ganges, or Mother Ganga, as the locals referred to her. A wonderful enlightened pundit who we affectionately called G, and you can picture this little Yoda Indian man who had this like little bobblehead, and a serious love of social media. He was always on his phone, and he'd walk around chanting Jai Gurudev, Jai Gurudev. G led us in a yajna, which is a traditional Hindu fire ceremony. With the intention of the fire ceremony, it was to purify us and burn all our karma and offer up all of our limiting beliefs that keep us shackled and prevent us from reaching boundless love, joy, and enlightenment. During the fire ceremony, we gave offerings to the fire and chanted in Sanskrit. It sounds beautiful. It is beautiful. It's also physically uncomfortable, boring as shit. And after what felt like 4 hours, with 15 of my new friends squashed into a rocky cave, in the heat, we were hungry, I needed to pee, and I had no clue what she was saying. Not to mention my fear of doing something disrespectful. I really wanted to strip down to my bikinis and catch some sun, or take a sneaky selfie to put on my social media story. But it was that time I realised I'd be spending a lot of time on this trip and these rituals. I'd already dumped myself in Mother Ganga that morning, as G led us in our daily morning practice, submerging in the freezing cold Ganga and chanting and asking Ganga for all that we desired. This daily purification practice was optional, but from day one I decided, again, I was going to surrender to the experience and go with the mantra, discipline over motivation. Even if I didn't feel like being purified, I'd do it anyway. I figured when in India, do as the Indians do. So for the next few weeks, I was all in, a part-time vegan yogi chanting Hindu devotee. I also had some incredibly funny moments, of course, like being chased by a monkey, getting in trouble for patting the dogs. You cannot touch the dogs, Mrs. Paula, they have rabies. And being rejected at a local hospital when I tried to give blood because apparently I'm anemic. 2 Indian nurses ushered me to a set of scales, and when I asked the translator, "Why do you need to weigh me?" the nurses giggled, and it was translated that they wanted to know why the giant overfed Aussie, what does she weigh? So I giggled with my new friend, my new Aussie yoga vegan friend. And I said, "This is because you've all forced me to be a vegan for 3 weeks. I just need a steak and a glass of bread." These traditional purification ceremonies went on and on, but they were intertwined with amazing experiences like visiting the Beatles ashram. And I was quite taken by the love story and the magnificence of the Taj Mahal and climbing a beautiful spiritual mountain barefoot. I completely surrendered to the process. Discipline over motivation, all in. And clearly the purification process was working. About 10 days into my India trip, I jumped on a flight and headed south for southern India. And I was seated next to a nervous Indian woman who, from what I could see, she was scared shitless of flying. I know this because she grabbed my hand fiercely at every minor turbulence. So thinking it would be rude to pull out my book and my headphones, I dropped into meditation. Twice during that trip, I was pulled out of my meditation as I felt my body gasping for breath. I'd sit there and go, which I didn't actually think much of until a bit later in my trip. On my next stop, We did a little of what we in the West call yoga, so yoga asana, what you would think of if you went to a yoga class here. But in the East, yoga refers to meditation. And it felt really great to finally move my body after being cramped in caves for so long. We then went to a rooftop located beside a beautiful spiritual mountain, Arunachala, which we had climbed barefoot the day before. It was here that we practiced one of my newfound favourite types of yoga, which is bhakti yoga. And we had a kirtan, which is chanting and devotion. Yep, a bunch of hippie yogis sitting around chanting in Sanskrit. And trust me when I say, the first time I did this at yoga teacher training, I giggled to myself that if my friends knew what I was doing, they would heckle me relentlessly. And they would also think that I'd joined a cult. The Vedic tradition believes that we are all living in a time of ignorance, and that for most of us, enlightenment is impossible. They also believe that the fastest way to enlightenment in this time of ignorance is through bhakti yoga or chanting. So my intention was always to put my critical, judgmental brain aside and surrender to the experience. And one of my teachers is a wonderful musician, guitarist and singer, and he led us in the kirtan. We sat around for about an hour chanting in Sanskrit, and at one point I looked up at the beautiful mountain and could see this beautiful orange-red aura. I felt in the most euphoric state of bliss, and later I said to everyone, "Did you all see that aura around the mountain?" And they said, "No." So later, my teacher took me aside and said, "You saw the aura because your brain waves had dropped into coherence during the kirtan, and you'd synchronized to a higher level of consciousness. That's how you see an aura." And the reason it was bright red and orange is because the Arana in Arunachala means bright red fire. So of course my geeky science brain went home and studied vibrational frequency and brainwaves. And then it took me to studying a short course on vibrations and mantra in yogic practice. So of course my kids think it's funny that I can chant the Gayatri mantra in Sanskrit, but they can also do it too, which I love. And occasionally we chant on the way to school drop-off until we almost arrive and quickly put the windows up and stop so people don't think we're the weird hippie. My teacher was so excited to take us to the final ashram of the pilgrimage. And she explained we were going to Amma's ashram in a very poor part of India. And that Amma was the depiction of the divine feminine, basically a modern day Jesus. She told stories of miracles that Amma had performed, just like Jesus, to show that she was the divine spirit. Okay, Paula, keep an open mind, I thought to myself, which was very difficult at 4 o'clock one morning as we were waiting for Amma to arrive with her holy elephant. So as we stood around in the dark wishing there was an espresso machine in poverty-stricken India, I leaned over and a new friend said to me, "What the fuck are we doing?" And I giggled and said, "We're waiting for Indian Jesus." After a short while, energy started to build and a magnificent elephant appeared in the distance along with an entourage. The elephant was escorting Amma, the divine feminine. But as they came closer, my skepticism grew bigger and bigger as I started to notice Amma was in fact a very masculine Indian man with feminine mannerisms carrying a white parasol. Come on, I thought to myself as I had a little giggle. But my limited judgmental brain kicked in once again, and I watched Amma's devotees drop to the floor in full surrender of the divine feminine. Stop judging, Paula. Svaha, the Sanskrit term for surrender, which was another mantra for our trip. So that afternoon we prepared to attend a puja, a traditional Hindu ceremony of worship with Amma. So we gathered offerings of flowers and fruit from the local market. And I giggled at my teachers because they were like excited groupies ready to see Amma, the divine feminine, and hoping that Amma might talk to them. Once again, I found myself sitting for hours and hours responding in Sanskrit, receiving countless blessings from Amma as she meticulously painted and decorated and gave offerings to a giant Hindu deity statue. Hours later, the curtains drew, and I thought, right, I can finally go back to the ashram and jump into bed, when my teacher said, "Should we go and get a drink and we'll come back?" It was only intermission. We were going back to see the unveiling of the deity and to receive a blessing from Amma. So I mustered up as much spiritual enthusiasm as I can, discipline over motivation, and said, "Great." And eventually we were back at the ashram, lining up to see Amma. So I closely watched all of Amma's devotees so I could act appropriately when it was my turn. When it was time, I offered Amma a wreath of flowers and some fruit I got from the local Indian ladies. And I gave her a special ring of mine. It was this ring that I wear on my thumb, which is mine and my husband's wedding rings that I've melted down and put together as one ring. So Amma asked my name, and she asked what I thought of India, and if I was enjoying my time, and she blessed me in the ring, and she wished me a pleasant stay. So I will admit, despite my skepticism, it was a pretty cool moment. And the energy in the room was undeniably very powerful and intoxicating, and I felt like I was tripping. It seemed I was on a natural high. And then something strange happened after that. I walked back across the dark and poverty-stricken streets of India and into my dorm at the ashram. My Aussie roommate Laura was there. She'd gone back earlier because she wasn't feeling well. So in a sleepy voice, she looked up and said, "How was Amma's ceremony?" And all I can remember is I replied and said, "Can you feel the energy in this room?" And I can't recall if Laura replied or not. All I know is that I jumped into bed. And the energy I was feeling in my body was extreme, but I must have fallen into some kind of sleep. And I only know this because next thing I woke up, gasping for breath, and my abdomen was contracting again, just like it did on the plane, but like 100 times bigger. The intense high I was experiencing, along with the physical sensations of gasping for breath and abdominal contractions, felt really quite unnerving. Yet there was this surreal calmness coming over me. And I must have then fallen asleep because all I remember is waking up the next day, just feeling a little bit off. I went to breakfast in the dining hall and then said to the group, "I'm going to go back to the room, I just don't feel great." And I fell asleep, woke up at midday, totally back to normal. So when I spoke to my teacher about the experience, she explained that I'd had a Kundalini awakening, which is a profound spiritual experience. And I knew of the concept of Kundalini, but I'd never expected to have an experience like that and an awakening, as it's considered really rare for us in the West, given our lifestyle. So according to Tantric tradition, Kundalini energy is the ultimate life force, divine feminine energy. And in Sanskrit, Kundalini means coiled snake, the energy that lies dormant at the base of our spine. And when Kundalini energy is free to flow up through our chakras, it leads to an expanded state of consciousness, joy, and love. Many yogis spent years preparing for an experience like that, and mine had happened spontaneously. So coming to our final day at the ashram, there was one final thing I needed to do. When we arrived at the ashram, we were gifted with a piece of string that we were to tie around a nearby love tree. The concept was to ask for deeper love and connection in our current relationships, or for singles like me, to ask for love to come into our lives. On the last day, my beautiful new yogi friend Laura said to me with a cheeky grin, "So Rumi, when are you going to tie your string?" And I looked up at her and I said one word, "Fuck." Which meant I hate you and I love you for making me do this. Something I want to do, but I just can't bring myself to do it. So she grabbed another beautiful yogi friend that we'd made from the US, and with two beautiful divine feminines either side me, we head off to the stupid love tree. They stood back and they watched me approach the tree, where I stood and stared with tears streaming down my eyes. I felt blocked and all of my limitations rose up. It was time to finally let go of those past experiences with love and open myself up again. So I closed my eyes and began the process of manifesting the kind of love I wanted to draw into my life. I felt all of the emotions in my heart, pure love and nurturance. I tied the string around the tree and I felt more tears streaming down my eyes. But this time they were tears of release. I felt free. So I turned around to the two beautiful women who were just waiting to catch me. And they literally held me in the warmest, loving embrace. And being true yogi teachers, the three of us synchronized our breath together. Without speaking, we just turned around and walked straight back to the ashram. So as I waited for my ride back to the airport to make the journey home, my yoga teacher said to me, "How do you feel?" And I replied, "I have no idea what I'm going to say when people ask me how my trip was. I don't even know what just went on." And in all her wisdom, she said, Just say you had a wonderful time and great experiences. You'll know when you feel ready to share more. So today's the first time I'm sharing my story. Drink, pray, love. So drink. That was the lowest point in my life so far. And I have zero judgment and only love and compassion for that girl that was not coping with life very well back then. Pray. I'm so grateful that I listened to my inner voice that told me over and over in my darkest hours that I will be okay. And to follow charm, which led me to yoga teacher training, and then to India, and to my spiritual awakening. Love. I went back to work a few days after my trip and realised I wasn't ready to dive back into work. So I listened to my inner guidance that told me I needed more time off. Don't worry about work, don't worry about money, you'll be fine, she whispered. So this time I listened and I took another 6 weeks off. And I spent Christmas holidays with the kids, which was wonderful. During that time, a very awesome human of the male kind came into my life. He literally walked straight through my door. And my jaw dropped open. But I'm not calling him the love part of this story. You see, as girls, we grow up listening to fairy tales about being rescued by Prince Charming. But I don't believe in waiting for Prince Charming to rescue us and bring us happiness. I believe that unconditional, boundless love, light and joy can be found in every single moment. And I believe the key to freedom and contentment is stripping away all of the layers of conditioning, past experience, culture, and societal norms. A process that can be confronting, boring, irksome, arduous, lonely, and profoundly joyous all at once. But it's worth it. It allows you to touch the deepest parts of yourself and to reveal your soul and to feel true self-love. And to quote my favourite neuroscientist, Dr. Joe Dispenza, once you've had that experience, you can't go back to business as usual. You change. And you realise that the love part of my story is that I know I will always live happily ever after, with or without a Prince Charming.